Well, this is Brandon Hellwig of UCFsports.com. And after losing on the road at Cincinnati last weekend to fall to 0-3 in Big 12 play, the Knights are back in the bounce house on Saturday to face the West Virginia Mountaineers, a program in a similar situation going through a rebuild with a familiar face back at head coach and also at 0-3 in the Big 12. So to learn more about the Mountaineers, I'm excited to be joined today by Keenan Cummings of WVSports.com. What's up, Keenan?
Doing well, Brandon. Thanks for having me back on, man. Always a good time.
Yeah, I think we've talked with you the last couple years. Obviously, UCF and West Virginia being two out of the three teams in the Big 12 in the Eastern time zone. It's a shame that, at least for UCF next season, does not play Cincinnati and does not play West Virginia. I kind of feel like that should be, I don't know how they can do it. They should have some sort of, annual matchups. I feel like us three on the Eastern time zone anyway should play every year. Do you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, at least find a way to make them play at least one of them every year, just because it makes sense. West Virginia's last game was a 10:30 p.m. kickoff time here. The game didn't end till almost 2:30, 3 in the morning. I didn't even get finished done working till like almost 6, 7 in the morning. So yeah, fun times.
We're gonna go. Well, UCF plays a game at BYU. That'll be the season-ending game, the regular season on Thanksgiving weekend. But I know when we talked last year, I know we were talking about Neil Brown being on the hot seat and kind of questions about his future. I think that was a mid to late November game. West Virginia won, which would be the final win of Neil Brown's tenure as Mountaineer head coach. I believe, was he fired after the Texas Tech loss to end the season?
Yes, a couple days after that.
Yeah, so prior to the bowl game. So just kind of talk me through that process last year. Both programs, both UCF and West Virginia, kind of did the same thing. They went back to a former coach that was successful and had kind of left on their own to go elsewhere. And with Frost at UCF and Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia. So just kind of talk me through that whole search process last year. Was it surprising that they settled on Rich? Was there a lot of buzz about him early on during the search? Just kind of talk to me how I guess you were Ren Baker and the staff at WV just kind of settled on, hiring back Rich.
Yeah, I think it was always a name that was on the list. I wouldn't have said it was at the top of the list, but as you go through these things kind of take on a life of their own. And, Rich was there. He was a guy that kept popping up, obviously was able to come in and kind of impress Ren with his vision and the plan he has. He has obviously some big time support here at West Virginia as well, given what he does, given his ties. So I think in a lot of ways it made sense. West Virginia was looking for a different style, a different type of coach than what they had under Neil Brown. And, Rich fits that. He's known for his hard edge, his tough teams, really understands, obviously the way it ended in 2007, the first time there's some sore feelings, but, Rich gets it. He understands West Virginians. He understands what it's all about. And it made a lot of sense. Obviously he inherited a situation that was kind of rough. West Virginia was kind of a middling team last year, and they lost a ton of seniors. And then they, of course, lost even more players than that in the transfer portal. So, Rich had to add 80-some new players, once he got hired. So it's been a little crazy since he arrived. But if you would have told me in 2007, after what unfolded, that Rich Rodriguez would be your head coach, there's no way I would have believed it. But it's just a testament to the saying, time heals all wounds, and nothing heals wounds better than winning. So once that starts to happen, it'll be interesting to see how far Rich can take this thing.
Yeah, very similar to what UCF just went through. I would have been shocked if we were talking, last season, before our game, and if someone would have told me, Gus Malzahn's going to essentially step away and Scott Frost would be the head coach again, I would have told you were crazy. But that's what happened. So how did what was this overall fan base? With UCF, I think when they kind of looked at the candidate pool, and I don't know if obviously fans don't make the head coaching decision, but I don't know if they were super excited about any of the other names being mentioned for the UCF job. And I think everyone kind of rallied around the idea of bringing back Frost. How did the fan base react to Rich Rod? Was it kind of split down the middle? Did fans kind of warm up to it? Were they excited about it? How would you assess the fan reaction?
I'd say it was divisive in some ways. There were some fans that were absolutely all for it. They remember what Rich Rodriguez did here in his first tenure, and they wanted him to come back. There were some fans that wanted Rich back the entire time. Yeah, if I'm just being honest, they would have taken him back at any point. And then you have other fans that were deeply hurt, emotional over how things unfolded, did not want him back. You had others that really didn't want him back and then have now grown to love the move. So it was kind of all over. I do think that the more time that passes, since the initial announcement, I do think fans generally are in support. You're always going to have a few people out there that just can't get over, the past. And I think that that's going to be the case in any situation. It's people handle things differently, but for the most part, I think Rich has a lot of support here from a lot of different people, and especially the people that matter, the administration and, some of the money people.
So how is this season being viewed, I guess, going into it? Like you said, 80 new players, UCF has 70 new players. You want to see progress, I think, with UCF. At least fan expectations were just to find a way to get 6 wins and make a bowl game and show that you're making progress compared to your first 2 seasons in the Big 12. What about West Virginia? They had a little bit better season, obviously, than UCF last year, but none of that even matters anymore when you lose the entire roster pretty much. So was bowl eligibility kind of the goal, or what would you say were the preseason expectations? Because, no one really knows. You got new staff, new players, new quarterback. You don't know how things are going to really work out.
Yeah, I think it was all over the board. It depended on who you talk to, kind of like what I was talking about earlier with the fan reaction. Some people were throwing out 9 wins. Some people were throwing out 4 wins. I mean, everywhere in between. I think it really is how much faith you had in the coaching staff and the players they were bringing in. I thought a realistic goal would be to make a bowl game. In our preseason projections, I usually am pretty close, but I even openly admitted this year I kind of just went on a feeling. I think I picked West Virginia to go 7-5. And no facts, just feelings. And really, it was because we just didn't know. It was impossible to know. There were so many new faces in so many different places that this was a team that was really going to be pretty much an unknown. And then once you get into the season, West Virginia's dealt with a lot of injuries, and injuries happen for everybody. But, West Virginia's lost their top running back, one of their top receivers, actually both of their top running backs, multiple quarterbacks. So it's been a carousel. So they're not where anybody really expected them to be right now at 2-4. But West Virginia did get one thing done early this season. They did manage to beat Pitt, which keeps a lot of people in Morgantown happy.
Yeah, and tell me more about that. So the week before you play Ohio, and I know they've been fairly solid in the MAC, but a Big 12 team technically should not be losing to a MAC team. So what was kind of the ebbs and flows of the reactions? You lose to Ohio, but then the next week you have Pitt, and probably people were wondering what the heck's going to happen here. But it's a rivalry game, so you throw out all records out the window. You beat Pitt in an overtime game. Just kind of talk me through the fan base reaction over those 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, West Virginia had so many opportunities. The defense forced 3 turnovers in the second half, and the offense just couldn't do anything with it. And it's kind of the exact opposite of what people expected. But again, I mentioned some of the injuries, and that was a game where they lost 2 players. But the real issue with West Virginia has been their offensive line. It's hard for them. It's a completely new unit. I mean, they lost their top 8 guys from last year, or 7 of their top 8 guys, and multiple backups to the transfer portal. So it's been, a process rebuilding that. It's really hard to do that, as Colorado found out in year 1. And then you get to Pittsburgh, West Virginia played well early. You think that, they're doing a really good job. Pitt gets the lead. Pitt gets all the momentum. And then West Virginia storms back, forces overtime. They're down 10 with just, in the fourth quarter, forces overtime, wins the game, and really kind of changes the trajectory of the season in a sense, just from the way that fans look at this. Obviously, nobody's going to be happy at 2-4, but when one of those 2 wins is your arch rival at home in a game that, you were underdogs, I think that most people will take that. So now the last couple of weeks, I've wrote about this a little bit, just kind of the luster of that win is wearing off a little bit once Big 12 play has began. But, West Virginia did not get an easy schedule to open Big 12 play. They've played 3 really difficult teams. Started at Kansas, then Utah and BYU on the road. So they haven't really gotten an easy draw, but they're going to have to play more competitive, I think, for fans to calm down a little bit.
Yeah, what would you say is kind of, like you said, the schedule has not been friendly. UC has been a little bit more competitive in their losses, but they're still losses. What has been the biggest issue for everyone? Rich Rod's been known for offense. Just how is the offense looking? You said the offensive line is, patched together with guys from the portal, brand new guys playing together for the first time. Has that been the biggest issue along with the quarterback injuries? Just kind of talk us through why you think the offense has struggled so much.
Yeah, it's a long list of things, really. There's just some of it's just freak circumstance. Some of it is just circumstance of the season. I mentioned the offensive line. They've played better at times, and then they've struggled at times. I think that you'll get that when you're throwing a group together. I don't care who it is. It's just kind of that's a position where typically you have to grow, as a unit. And I think that, in that Pitt game, you saw them play really well at times and then take a step back the last couple of weeks. And again, they've played some very talented defensive fronts, so that'll do that to you. Quarterback play is another thing. West Virginia has played 5 different quarterbacks this year. 5 different quarterbacks have taken snaps. Really 4 in meaningful snaps have played. So, I mean, when you're playing 4 different quarterbacks, some of that's due to injury, some of it's due to ineffectiveness. As I mentioned, Jaheim White, that by far their best offensive player coming into the year, got hurt on an illegal tackle at Ohio, early in that game, and he's out for the year. Jaden Bray's out for the year at wide receiver. So it's been a lot of different things. You've seen glimpses at times, but the consistency, especially right now with the version that West Virginia is probably going to be rolling out on Saturday, they have 2 freshman quarterbacks. One's a redshirt freshman. The other one's a true freshman. And as anybody knows, when you're playing young quarterbacks, you're limited in what you can do, at least till they get kind of their feet under them. So, there isn't a lot of, I guess, I don't want to say creativity because that's not fair, but West Virginia's running the quarterback a lot right now. A lot of try to get the ball out of his hands at times. So I think that right now it's more about trying to find what this version of West Virginia can be. I think that's why the bye week was important. Those 2 guys got a lot of reps. So maybe they come out of the bye week. Rich has a history of this. Back in 2003, I think West Virginia was 2-4 coming out of the bye, and they ended up winning, I think, 6 straight. So that's a different team. Obviously, it had been under him a few years, but he's done this before, and he felt the bye week was productive. Now we'll see if it had any effect on the offense.
So what is the quarterback situation? The starter going into the season was Nico, right? And he's injured or foot, or maybe he's opting out or what's going on with him?
Yeah, he has a foot injury. He's out for the year. He will not be playing. Jalen Henderson was the number 2 transfer from Texas A&M. He is doubtful. Max Brown was kind of the 3rd guy they brought in, played at Florida and Charlotte. He saw limited reps because he's been hurt pretty much all year. Rich said he was probable, but still banged up. The 2 quarterbacks you got left are Khalil Wilkins, who's a redshirt freshman, didn't play last year for West Virginia, and Scotty Fox, who's a true freshman. Both of them are kind of dynamic runners. They both can throw the ball. But as you know, young quarterbacks, you kind of feel your way out and learn some things. But I saw glimpses, against BYU. That's a tough environment for any freshman to make their first start. Wilkins got the start out there. Fox played a little bit, looked really good at the end of the game, but at that point, the game had already pretty much been decided. So it'll be interesting, to see how they're used. If Rich goes Wilkins primarily the whole game, if he plays them both. The one thing that he's been consistent about from day one is he's not like your typical coach. He'll play multiple quarterbacks in a game. He doesn't care. He's shown that. He's gone to multiple quarterbacks every game this season, whether West Virginia was winning or losing. So I think those are your 2 guys that are going to be in play. And West Virginia is probably going to try to run the ball quite a bit, but they do have some weapons on the outside if they can get the ball to them.
Yeah, talk about those weapons. Who are some of the players to watch on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, running back's kind of up in the air too. So that right there will depend on, the reports that come out. Obviously, West Virginia is going to be without Jaheim White, obviously. Ty Edwards is getting his hip looked at by a specialist, and that's a big loss. The one game he played, he rushed for 140 yards and 3 touchdowns against Pitt. and hasn't really played much since. So Dior Hubbard is kind of the next man up there. Sincere Bowers. Now, wide receiver, they got a good one in Cam Vaughn. Came with Rich from Jacksonville State. He's a converted quarterback. He was their leading wide receiver last year. Has looked really good at times. They've got a slot guy, Rodney Gallagher. He's been here a couple of years, and some other wide receivers that can catch. Their tight end is a little underrated too, Grayson Barnes. He's a transfer from Northern Illinois. He's the guy that made the catch to put the game into overtime against Pitt. Really nice catch. So he's a guy that they can use as well, but they've got to find more consistency there because throwing the football was an issue at BYU with Wilkins in there. I don't think it's necessarily a thing he can't do. You know, I watched him in 7-on-7 come up out of high school and throw the ball all over the place. It's a matter of kind of getting comfortable and understanding what he has to do in his role.
So on the other side of the ball, defense, who did Rich Rod bring in as defensive coordinator, and just kind of how has that unit looked this season?
Zach Alley, it was kind of the big swing hire for Rich. He came from Oklahoma where he was calling plays, you know, under Brent Venables. So that was a big get for West Virginia. And I think that, you know, you listen to the guy talk, he knows what he's talking about. Obviously, rebuilding the defense, very similar to the offense. Played really, really well in the non-conference. I think they were only allowing around 14 points a game, 300 yards. Really have struggled once the Big 12 play kind of opened up. They've struggled to generate, you know, any kind of pass rush. Missed tackling has been issues at times. I think the frustrating thing for Allie is, you know, he talked about this after the Utah game. You know, Utah and Kansas both ran some plays that they practiced in practice against the same defense, and guys were out of position. And, you know, that there's not a lot you can do about that, you know, if guys aren't getting in the right spots. So some of that's kind of learning. You know, they spent the bye week. You know, we talked to him on Tuesday. They spent the bye week kind of focusing on themselves, you know, getting back to the basics, kind of, you know, having better eye discipline, you know, too much eyes in the backfield, not knowing what's actually where they're supposed to be at the play. Also tackling, you know, big concern. You know, those are two things they really had to get better because even if you do have good eye discipline and you're in the right spot, if you can't get the guy to the ground, it doesn't matter. And that has been an issue for West Virginia at times. Scrambling quarterbacks have hurt them at times, especially guys that can throw when they scramble. They've been able to get some pressure. They just can't get guys to the ground. And that wasn't an issue in the non-conference. It has been an issue the last 3 weeks. But, you know, the last 3 weeks, they've gone against three pretty good quarterbacks too.
Yeah, so who are some of the top players on that side? Who are some of the names we're going to hear a lot on Saturday?
West Virginia kind of plays a committee up front, so I think you can pick multiple guys there. Their most active player, I would say, is Fred Perry, their nickelback, which sometimes, you know, if your safety is one of your most active players, not necessarily the best sign, but that's a position that they'll use all over the field. You know, they'll use it in the box. You know, he forced 2 fumbles against BYU and was kind of all over the place. So I think that he's a guy that keep an eye on. In the secondary, Michael Coates has played really, really well this year outside of the BYU game. He had his first kind of down game, but I think you're going to get that at times when you get challenged at corner. Nobody's perfect there, clearly. And they have some other guys too. You know, their linebackers have been pretty solid, Chase Wilson and Reed Carrico. But right now, some of it is kind of figuring themselves out. And I think they do have talent, and I do believe in the leadership that they have. With Allie over top and the coaching staff there. It's more about kind of sorting out some things that have been issues, because these are things that, you know, Zach was talking about even when they were winning games that they had to fix or they were going to get exposed. And now you're kind of seeing that come to fruition.
What's kind of the buzz about this game, at least amongst the fan base? Obviously, you know, coaches and players are going to, you know, say it's, you know, it's the next game, you want to win them all. But is this kind of being looked at with the UCF kind of going in a similar rebuild? Is this, I know that this is probably one, at least viewed as one of the more winnable games on the rest of the schedule, because it's a tough stretch. You got TCU and Houston, which is improving. Colorado maybe beatable. Then you got Arizona State and Texas Tech to end the season. So how are fans kind of viewing this? Is this kind of viewed as one of the better opportunities that the Mountaineers could potentially pull off a win?
Yeah, I think you have to almost. I mean, if you look at that schedule, West Virginia got no favors with their Big 12 schedule this year. They have to play a lot of tough teams and some of them on the road. So I think you have to. You know, obviously it's hard to win on the road in this league, but West Virginia's gone down to Orlando and won before. Obviously different coaching staff, you know, different situation. But this isn't Rich Rodriguez's first rodeo. I think fans are, if you ask fans honestly, I think they're hopeful that the bye week was able to get this team right a little bit, get them to play better than they had played, the last couple weeks, kind of reset a little bit, get the young quarterbacks more focused and kind of, I guess, driven towards what they need to be doing. And you're going to be learning. I mean, it's just the truth. If you play young quarterbacks, they're going to be learning on the job. They can play great one week, struggle the next. You saw it even back when Iowa State was playing Rocco Beck when he was young. And compared to what he is now, it's two different players. So I think that you'll see that, you'll see the maturation there at the position if those two continue to play. But West Virginia fans are hoping that kind of peaks out a little bit after the bye. At least one of those guys is able to take a step forward and really kind of start to engineer and move this offense.
Yeah, we don't know yet who's going to start at quarterback for UCF, although Frost indicated that all players should be available. So if that is the case, I think Taven Jackson will likely start, but obviously that's been a big question mark this year, just week to week, who's available at quarterback. But for you covering West Virginia, what are your keys of this game? What needs to happen for West Virginia to have a shot in this one? And do you have a score prediction?
I think West Virginia needs to run the football and they need to stop the run. Those two things kind of go hand in hand. This is a team that they've struggled at times to have consistency offensively. It would go a long way if they were able to stay ahead of the sticks and really not allow UCF and some of their active pass rushers to get after them, especially with a young quarterback. Obviously, every game, special teams and, don't turn the ball over, no penalty. I mean, those are cliches. Obviously, you need to do that every game. But I think it really starts there. And defensively for West Virginia, you need to stop the run, as I mentioned. And then when UCF does challenge them down the field, you got to do a much better job than you did, I guess, 2 weeks ago against BYU, because West Virginia gave up some deep balls, and that hasn't really been that big of an issue. But I know that UCF likes to challenge people down the field at times, use the run to set that up. So those are two things that are going to be critical, and you need to get some consistency offensively. And I do think that starts with running the football. As for score, I think this one's going to be close, Brandon. I do. I think that West Virginia is going to play a lot better out of the bye. I think it depends on who plays quarterback for UCF as well. I think if Jackson's healthy, that gives them more options offensively. I think this is going to be like a 24, 28, 21 game, somewhere in there. And I'm kind of thinking West Virginia can pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I think I'm predicting, UCF to win by a touchdown or 10 points or so. I think the line might be 11, but I mean, honestly, it could go either way. You don't know what to expect week to week offensively from UCF. The defense has been, pretty good and solid for UCF this year under Alex Grinch. Just the offense has kind of been head scratching at times with penalties and other issues that have cropped up. But I know I've heard there's a lot of West Virginia fans, that are either from Florida or the Southeast. I know there's going to be a lot of blue and gold in the stands on Saturday, like there was two years ago. So that'll be interesting. It probably will be some pretty good support for the Mountaineers on Saturday. But well, Keenan, I appreciate it. Thanks for talking to me and learning more about West Virginia. And I guess we won't talk next year because I know both teams are not on the schedule for whatever reason, but maybe we'll catch up in another couple of years.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. Always appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Keenan. Take care.